When NASA launched its first astronaut, nobody celebrated the women who'd calculated whether he'd survive. On May 5, 1961, Alan Shepard climbed into Freedom 7. The nation held its breath. But before that rocket ever lit, a team of mathematicians, most of them women, nearly all of them invisible, had spent months solving equations that would determine whether Shepard came home alive or didn't come home at all. Their names weren't in the headlines. Their faces weren't on the stamps. Yet without them, the Mercury program doesn't exist. Here's the question that opens this story. Who actually did the math that sent humans to space? The answer isn't a single person. It's a core of mathematicians, mostly women, working in a basement-level facility at NASA Langley Research Center in Virginia. They called themselves computers not because they operated machines, but because they were the machines. By the 1940s and 50s, NASA needed trajectories calculated to a precision we can barely fathom today. A single decimal place error in a reentry angle meant the difference between splashdown and disaster. Computers, the machines, couldn't do it reliably, so NASA hired mathematicians, brilliant ones, and because brilliant women were paid less than brilliant men, the agency hired a lot of women. Katherine Johnson was one of them, a black woman from West Virginia who learned to count before she could walk. By 1953, she was calculating trajectories for aircraft at Langley. By 1961, she was running numbers for Shepard's mission. But Johnson wasn't alone. She was part of a unit that included Dorothy Vaughan, Mary Jackson, Christine Darden, and dozens of others whose contributions were cataloged, filed, and forgot. So what exactly were they computing? Picture a trajectory problem like this. A spacecraft leaves Earth at a specific velocity, angle, and altitude. As it climbs, gravity pulls it down, air resistance slows it. The Earth rotates beneath it. You need to know to within meters where it will be at every single second of flight, and you need to know it before the rocket launches. That's not one equation. That's thousands of them chained together. Differential equations, hyperbolic functions, calculations so intricate they'd take a single person weeks to complete. The computers worked in teams. One would calculate the first segment, pass it to the next, who'd build on it. A human assembly line of mathematics. But here's where the story gets complicated. These women weren't just doing rote arithmetic. They were catching errors. They were questioning assumptions. Dorothy Vaughan taught herself Fortran programming in the late 1950s before most of NASA engineers had touched a computer. She saw where the future was heading and moved her entire team toward it. Mary Jackson, a physicist and engineer, didn't just compute trajectories. She designed the procedures that would make those trajectories safer. She worked on the heat shield calculations that would protect astronauts during re-entry. She pushed so hard against the ceiling of what was expected of her that she eventually became NASA's first black female engineer. And Katherine Johnson? Her work on Shepard's mission was so precise, so trusted, that John Glenn himself, the first American to orbit Earth, asked for her to verify the electronic computer's trajectory calculations before his flight in 1962. An astronaut trusting a woman's math over a machine's. That says something. Yet for decades, their names weren't attached to those calculations. The mission succeeded, the astronauts got the parades, and the computers, the women, stayed in the basement. Literally, many of them worked in segregated facilities. Some had separate bathrooms, some had to use different water fountains, and still they showed up, they worked, they sent humans to space. The turning point came slowly. In 2016, 55 years after Shepard's flight, Katherine Johnson's story was finally told widely. A film was made, a book was written. Suddenly the nation realized what it had overlooked. Not just overlooked, actively erased. These weren't footnotes in the space program, they were foundational. What we're really talking about here is a pattern. A pattern where the work that matters most gets attributed to the people we see, while the work that makes that possible gets credited to no one. The astronauts were brave, they were, but bravery without math is just falling, and falling is not a space program. The Mercury 7 needed a secret weapon to reach space. That weapon wasn't a new rocket or a better capsule. It was human brilliance, multiplied, organized, and systemized. It was women who could calculate orbital mechanics in their heads while being told they weren't smart enough to vote on where the program should go. So when you think about the first human spaceflight, don't just think about the man in the capsule. Think about the woman at the desk, the one whose name you'll never know, the one who recalculated his trajectory 3 times because she didn't trust the first 2 answers. She was the reason he came home. And that's the answer to our opening question. Who calculated humanity's first steps to space? Not one person. A core. A team of mathematicians, mostly women, mostly overlooked, who understood that getting to space wasn't about heroics. It was about precision, rigor, and the kind of quiet brilliance that doesn't need applause to be real. Their story wasn't told because it was considered less dramatic than the astronauts, but it was always the more important one. Because without calculation, there is no mission. Without precision, there is no survival. And without these women, there is no Mercury program, no Apollo, no human spaceflight at all. The untold stories of space exploration aren't always about what happened in the sky. Sometimes they're about what happened in the basement, in the filing cabinets, in the margins of history where the real work was done. And those stories, the ones we almost lost, are exactly what this channel is here to uncover. Subscribe and don't miss the next one. Subscribe, there's a forgotten story like this one every week, waiting to rewrite what you thought you knew about space.